Coming up on our newscast tonight. The two Koreas meet again for working-level talks ahead of the historic summit this week. The latest session should help further iron out important details for the highly anticipated meeting between the leaders of Seoul and Pyongyang. In tune with the reconciliatory mood on the Korean Peninsula, Seoul halts loudspeaker broadcasting across the border and looks into adjusting the scheduled military drills held jointly with the United States. North Korea turned heads over the weekend with a surprise announcement. No more nukes and missiles, and its main nuclear test site will be shut down. We delve deeper to explore the implication of this gesture and responses from around the world. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome, I'm Daniel Choi. Before this week is up, the leaders of the two Koreas would have held their historic summit. Friday's event is seen as something that's helping the two sides make significant progress toward a diplomatic solution to the nuclear issue. Our Cha Sang-mi at the nation's top office starts things off.
Working-level officials from Seoul and Pyongyang met for a third round of talks to finalize the summit arrangements. The talks began at 10 a.m. Seoul time at Tongilgak on the northern side of Panmunjom.
North and South Korea held a third round of working-level talks prior to the Inter-Korean Summit that will be held in the Peace House of Panmunjom on April 27, 2018. They discussed security, protocol, and media coverage and reached a final agreement today.
The press director announced that President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Jong-un are to begin their historic meeting with an official greeting, and then they will hold a summit and an official dinner. Each side will finalize a list of participants and notify each other as soon as possible. To make sure that there are no embarrassing gaffes, Seoul's presidential office said Pyongyang will send an advance party on Wednesday to the South Korean side of Panmunjom for a joint rehearsal. Meanwhile, President Moon Jae-in has hailed North Korea's decision to freeze activity at its nuclear test site, saying Monday that it helps clear the way for the inter-Korean and U.S.-North Korea summits to be successful.
지난 20일 북한은 핵실험과 대륙간 탄도미사일 시험 발사 중지를 선언하고 그 실천적 조치로 풍계리 핵실험장의 폐기를 발표했습니다. 남북 정상회담과 북미 정상회담을 앞둔 북한의 성의 있는 선행 조치로 높이 평가합니다.
Speaking at a meeting of his senior secretaries, President Moon said North Korea halting its weapons testing was welcomed by the entire world, including President Trump, who said this was very good news for North Korea and the world and big progress. He added that should North Korea continue from its nuclear test freeze to ending its nuclear program completely, the North would be guaranteed a bright future. And he said he hopes that happens soon. President Moon also called on South Korea's political parties to put aside their differences at least until the summit and work together for a permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula and for peaceful denuclearization. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
The loudspeakers that blasted criticisms of the reclusive regime and even played South Korean music across the border will halt operations. The decision to stop the propaganda broadcast is part of efforts to set a positive tone as the two sides gear up for talks towards peace. Park Ji-won explains further.
From Monday, South Korea suspended its anti-Pyongyang, anti-Kim Jong-un regime broadcasts from its loudspeakers along the border between the two Koreas. South Korea's defense ministry said the decision to suspend propaganda broadcasts from some 40 broadcast speakers along the border was to ease tensions on the Korean Peninsula and to create a peaceful atmosphere for the summit talks.
We hope the suspension contributes to stopping mutual slander and propaganda between the two Koreas and to achieving a new beginning of peace.
Meanwhile, starting this Monday, South Korea and the United States start their annual military exercise as planned. K-Resolve is a 2-week command post exercise with computer-based simulations in 2 parts, one responding to a hypothetical attack by North Korea and the other an Allied counterattack. Some 12,000 troops from South Korea and the U.S. will participate in the exercise, which is similar in size to last year's. South Korea's defense ministry said it has yet to decide whether the exercise will take place on Friday, the day of the summit. The South Korean chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Chung Kyung-do, and his U.S. counterpart, General Vincent Brooks, will make a final decision on the matter early this week. The 4-week Full Eagle field training exercise is also underway, but the exercise has been low-key compared to past drills with no media exposure. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's diplomats met with senior officials from the United States and Japan, part of all-out efforts to best be prepared for the historic events to come. Lee Ji-won shares with us what was discussed.
The acting U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Susan Thornton, met on Monday with Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and Deputy Minister for Political Affairs Yoon Sun-gu. After a quick greeting from Minister Kang, Thornton had a long chat with Yoon about preparations for the Inter-Korean Summit.
I thought it was very important and good timing for me to come and show our close coordination on all of the North-South preparations. We're looking forward to seeing how things go this week and to learning from what happens in your meeting and to hearing how it goes and to following that up with our own meeting.
Thornton and Yoon discussed how their countries can work together to make the upcoming summits a success, to denuclearize North Korea, and to stabilize the Korean Peninsula. Cooperation between the allies, they said, is vital. The diplomats also recognized the significant roles that China and Japan play in the latest developments on the peninsula and agreed that, as such, close cooperation with the international community is also needed. On top of the North Korea question, pending issues related to the South Korea-U.S. alliance, including defense cost sharing, were also on the table. Thornton is slated to meet Seoul's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon on Tuesday. Lee, meanwhile, as South Korea's representative to the six-party talks, met Monday with his Japanese counterpart Kenji Kanasugi. They shared the latest developments related to North Korea's denuclearization, Kanasugi discussing the U.S.-Japan summit last week, and Lee the preparations for the Inter-Korean Summit. This comes as the foreign ministers of both sides had promised earlier this month to actively communicate and share related information. With the rapid developments on the Korean Peninsula and big decisions coming out of the North, the three countries are expected to continue their close cooperation to keep up the momentum for peace. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Over the weekend, North Korea made an announcement that caused quite a stir around the world. Kim Jong-un declared an end to nuclear development, that the regime will halt nuke tests and missile tests as well, and shut down its nuclear test site, adding from now on, Pyongyang's focus will be on its economy. To help us dig deeper and explore what the regime's intentions could be, we have our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee here with us in the studio. Jung-hee, welcome to our program.
Hi, Daniel.
First of all, a major break from Kim's traditional signature policy adopted 5 years ago. It's pursuing two things, of course, nuclear weapons development and its economy. And now it looks like he's going to ditch half of that plan.
Well, that's right. Claiming that it accomplished its nuclear weapons program perfectly in only 5 years, the North declared an end to its nuclear development. It says there's no more need to carry out nuclear or ICBM tests or use its Punggye test site where all 6 nuclear tests were carried out. Now, this moratorium on nuclear and missile test provocations sends out a message to the world that the regime has opened up the possibility of negotiating on denuclearization. The regime also expressed its willingness to keep in close contact with neighboring countries, which many see is to create a favorable environment to develop its economy, which, according to the regime, will be Pyongyang's sole focus from now on.
Right, that is if you don't read between the lines and don't look back at North Korea's track record. And now, this is certainly being received positively. We're hoping that this is a positive, constructive sign towards North Korea being prepared for the upcoming summits and showing sincerity towards the all-important meetings. But then, we know how unconventional and unpredictable the Hermit Kingdom has been so far.
Well, that's right. I definitely have to say that views are starkly divided across the world. But some do think that the North has vowed to take some of the more specific steps Washington would like to see in its process of denuclearization. And this move came without any predetermined reward, unlike in 2008, when Pyongyang destroyed a cooling tower for a nuclear reactor in Yongbyon in return for the U.S. removing North Korea from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. The North also attached no conditions to the moratorium on tests, unlike in early March, when it said it wouldn't carry out provocations, quote, so long as talks continue. The South Korean government views this as a meaningful progress towards denuclearization, since it was the North's voluntary decision to halt tests and dismantle the test site.
Right. Earlier you mentioned how North Korea was describing its decision, like it deserved a pat in the back, that it's also, while subtly boasting about its accomplishments in terms of nuclear weapons on the side. Right now it has declared a nuclear freeze, what's being viewed by around the world. And that, I believe, are the two words that some analysts and watchers from around the world are rather wary of.
That's right. At this point, we can't say that North completely decided to abandon its nuclear weapons. As for now, it has said nothing about what it's going to do with the nuclear weapons it has currently. And plus, because Pyongyang has claimed once again that its nuclear capability is complete, some suggest that the North has rather declared itself as an official nuclear state. For example, Victor Cha, who was U.S. President Trump's candidate for ambassador to South Korea, pointed out that a test ban, no first use, and no transfer are what a responsible nuclear-armed state would claim, and therefore the statement from the North is not a denuclearization statement. And there's also a view that dismantling the Punggye nuclear test site has nothing more than a symbolic meaning, because the site has already been damaged a lot due to strong nuclear tests. So many see that the North has to rather destroy its nuclear weapons production facilities, not the test site, to prove sincerity.
Right. As for the all-important summits that are coming up for the three sides, how should Seoul and Washington approach this very important meeting with Pyongyang? I mean, this announcement certainly somewhat changes the complexion of the events to come.
Well, that's right. As for now, the North, as I've mentioned, has not said anything about what it's going to do with its nuclear weapons it has now. But we have to remember the fact that it could be leaving CVID, that's complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, as a final card to use at the negotiation table with the U.S. North Korea will want to receive economic support and have its regime security guaranteed for sure in return. And at this Friday's summit talks with Pyongyang, South Korea aims to reach only a comprehensive agreement with the North, which will probably be at the level of reaffirming the goal of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. The rest, in fact, the specific steps to actually denuclearize, like inspections and verifications, are expected to be discussed at the U.S.-North Korea summit to have the North actually turn its words into actions.
Right. We have noticed that in the previous summits, they had our hopes up, and then only to have us come crashing down with North Korea returning to its old tendencies. Hopefully this time they're showing some changes, although they certainly are highlighting some bargaining chips they have on their plates. But regardless, we will maintain a positive attitude towards it and hope for the best. Thank you so much for coming in today, Jong-un, with the details on North Korea's announcement and how the world is responding to it.
My pleasure.
Now, what about the regional powers? How do they view the upcoming historic summit? Today, we zoom in on Russia, a key player in North Korean affairs, an old communist ally and a member of the long-stalled six-party talks. Kwon Jang-ho files us this report from Vladivostok.
Vladivostok, a Russian port city just a couple of hundred kilometers from the North Korean border, and possibly the setting for an important meeting in the near future. Despite Russia offering support to South Korea and the US for opening dialogue with North Korea, there are some who say Moscow's influence has been somewhat sidelined. But that may not tell the entire story, as there are now rumors that Kim Jong-un is planning to visit Russia in May to meet with President Vladimir Putin. And that meeting could take place here in Vladivostok. Its proximity to North Korea has fueled such rumors. North Korean leaders have traditionally only travelled outside of North Korea by train for security reasons, as seen last month when Kim Jong-un met with Xi Jinping in Beijing. Although a meeting with Putin is not confirmed, the possibility of one shows Russia is still an important partner for North Korea.
Russia could be one of the security guarantors for North Korea if negotiations ever come close to making some agreement. Obviously, some guarantees will be needed. And I think Russia is one of the powers which would be able to provide such security guarantees to Pyongyang.
Local experts stress that Russia wants a peaceful Korean peninsula not only to avoid a nuclear war on their doorstep, but also because of the mutual economic potential. Currently, the Trans-Siberian Railway goes from Vladivostok in Russia's Far East almost 10,000 kilometers to Moscow. But at a few hundred kilometers in the opposite direction, it could go through North Korea all the way to South Korea, completing a link between East Asia and Europe. Moscow has invested some $300 million into the Rajin Hassan project, a rail link which connects Russia and North Korea. But due to international sanctions, activity has halted and its full potential remains unexplored.
For more than about 30 years, people in various countries in this area speak about cooperation, and North Korea is the only obstacle for this fast development, for cooperation. So if we solve this problem, it will work for all countries in this area, for Korea, for both Koreas, or for United Korea, for China, Japan, Russia, of course.
The upcoming North Korea summits with South Korea and the US have also led to talks of reconvening the six-party talks. That forum, now dormant for 11 years, also involved Russia, China and Japan and formed the framework for Pyongyang to denuclearize. Moscow has been keen to promote its merits despite the breakdown in previous agreements.
I think it's the format of six-party talks. It's very important. When we try to understand the current situation with nuclear crisis, I think it's important just to know who are, the participants of such kind of crisis. The United States and the North Korea? No, because we have the region and we have different actors.
Despite the stakes for Russia, how deeply involved Moscow will be remains to be seen, especially as President Putin has other foreign policy concerns on his plate at the moment, namely in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. But any international deal with North Korea will likely need to involve input from Moscow. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
The labor and management of GM Korea finally reached an agreement over their months-long row on restructuring plans. With this breakthrough, the company can avoid the worst-case scenario of filing for court receivership, at least for now. Kim Ho-kyung gets us up to speed with the developments.
General Motors Korea has managed to avoid filing for bankruptcy for now. Labor and management at the local unit of the U.S. carmaker tentatively agreed Monday on restructuring plans following a month-long row.
I want to thank both sides for going through the negotiations, especially the labor union for making a tough decision for the company despite having to bear with the pain of saying goodbye to their fellow workers. The company should never forget the great concession made by its laborers.
After a 14th round of negotiations, which began at 5 a.m. on Monday, the two sides reached a tentative understanding on major issues such as the fate of 680 workers at GM's plant in Kunsan in Gyeongsang-buk-do province, which will be shut down next month. The firm had initially offered the workers a 4-year leave without pay as one of the options. This proposal was scrapped as the labor union said it was no different from a layoff. Under the latest agreement, the workers in question will be given the choice of voluntary resignation or relocation to other GM factories in Korea, such as the one in Incheon, west of Seoul, and the one in Changwon in Gyeongsangnam-do province. The company vowed to continue negotiations for workers who don't choose either options and to form a special committee to discuss ways to normalize its management together with the labor union. Following the announcement, GM's Executive Vice President Barry Engel thanked the labor union and announced that the automaker will allocate production of 2 imported new models of sports utility vehicles to local factories to help stabilize their operations. The latest settlement seems to be welcomed by many, as the meeting with the board of directors, previously set for Monday evening, where the firm planned to file a court receivership, is now canceled, opening brighter possibilities for the carmaker to sustain its business in Korea. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
In the domestic political arena, the people may not be able to vote on amending the Constitution this June. Rival parties appear far from revising the National Referendum Act, which has to be completed by today in order for the public to be a part of that change during the upcoming local elections. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
A dark cloud is cast over the fate of the country's constitutional amendment. For a public vote to take place alongside local elections in June, as the government hopes, rival lawmakers needed to pass a revision to the National Referendum Act by Monday to leave enough time for other necessary legal procedures. The referendum law has to be changed because the existing version was ruled unconstitutional in 2014 for limiting the voting rights of Koreans overseas, and now it remains null and void. But the National Assembly has been at a standstill for the past 3 weeks due to a set of disputed bills as well as an online opinion rigging scandal involving a blogger with ties to a ruling party lawmaker.
To keep our promise with the public to hold a referendum in June, we have to pass the revised Referendum Act. We can link it to other issues. If the opposition doesn't cooperate, they lose the opportunity to amend the Constitution for the first time in 31 years. And break the promise made to the public, and will become the faction that dealt with the issue by political scheming.
To get things moving in Parliament, opposition parties have demanded the ruling Democratic Party of Korea accept their proposal for an independent probe into the opinion rigging scandal, on top of the ongoing police investigation. The scandal centers around a blogger using the name Drew King, who is suspected of using a computer program to promote online public opinions critical of the government. The suspect initially said that he and some others wanted to make it look as if the conservatives were behind it, but took a grudge against ruling party lawmaker Kim Kyung-soo after he turned down job requests.
A few days back, even lawmaker Kim and the presidential office said they were willing to accept our proposal for an independent probe. But the ruling party has been going back and forth on its stance, and now it appears that they will keep the issue shadowed by the Inter-Korean Summit. That is a disgrace and is an act of disregarding the public.
Now, with a referendum on constitutional amendment unlikely in June, there are 3 possible scenarios. One is that rival parties will go on to vote on the president's proposal by the legal timeframe's deadline of May 24th. Second, they can craft a proposal of their own and vote on it. Or lastly, the president can take back his version. But whichever option is taken, the blame game in the National Assembly is expected to intensify, with rival parties likely to point the finger at each other for failing to hold a public vote in June. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the number of foreign visitors to the nation took a drastic dive last year for various reasons, including China's retaliatory measures over a defense upgrade. After about 12 months of on-year decline, finally we're seeing a rebound. Kim Hye-sung sheds light on what's driving this welcome trend.
The number of foreign visitors to Korea in March jumped more than 10% on year to 1.37 million tourists. According to the Korea Tourism Organization Monday, March was the first time in 12 months that the country saw a boost in the number of visitors. A diplomatic standoff between Seoul and Beijing last year over Korea's deployment of a U.S. missile defense system led to a sharp decline in the number of Chinese tourists to Korea, who accounted for nearly half of the total number of foreign visitors to the country in 2016. The KTO attributed the latest turnaround to improving bilateral ties between Seoul and Beijing, lowered tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and the Korean government's efforts to attract more visitors from countries other than China. According to its data, the number of visitors from China rose near 12% last month on year to over 400,000. The number of visitors from Japan also received a boost for the first time in more than 5 years, recording 294,000 last month, which the KTO said was driven in large part by the new Hallyu boom, or the Korean wave among Japanese young people who are interested in Korean cosmetics and fashion items. Visitors from Taiwan rose more than 26% on year, and those from Hong Kong and Vietnam also surged over 30% and 49% on year, respectively. Visitors from the US, Canada, and Russia also went up by double digits in March. 김혜성, Arirang News.
The coverage of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit on Friday, including the historic moment when Kim Jong-un enters the South and the talks between the two leaders, will be broadcast live. Today, 4 companies, including Arirang TV and Yonhap News Agency, signed a broadcasting agreement for the summit. The station you're watching will provide English content for the historic event. It will also support foreign networks and hold discussions with experts during the event. The main press center will provide simultaneous interpretation and press releases in Korean and English. The core contents from the event will be translated into 9 languages, including Chinese and Spanish. Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates we need. And Michelle, what do you have for us today?
Well, we did have some unseasonably warm weather recently, but cool air pushed in and built up some rain clouds. Right now, it's raining heavily in the southern regions, especially Jeju Island. Until tomorrow, the central region will receive between 5 and 20 millimeters of rain, and much more is expected as we move down south. Jeju Island and the southeastern coast may even get up to 100 millimeters. And gradually into the afternoon, most regions of the country will be under cloudy skies along with Beijing and Tokyo tomorrow. And the mornings, Seoul will begin up to 11 degrees Celsius and similar for Daegu and Gyeongju at 12 degrees. And into the day, Seoul will top out to 16 degrees, Gwangju and Busan hitting up to 17 and 15 degrees. Until tomorrow, our daily highs are expected to be cool and linger below the seasonal average, but afterwards, the temperature will rise back up, bringing us into the warm spring weather again. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.